Hello and welcome to episode 238 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leaks. Damien, why have you got a smile on your face? Welcome, by the way.
It's just because I've known Andy for a very long time, and anybody who listens to this show will know that Andy has the amazing ability to never cease to amaze you of things that he's done in his past. So, yeah, I'm starting the show laughing because we were just discussing the idea of, I don't know really how we got onto it, about loading dishwashers. This isn't money related, but it's just a quick aside.
Yeah.
And then Andy turned around and said, do you know that I once wrote a rap about loading a dishwasher? To which, obviously, in the office, we were like, no, but and there's a whole story behind it, and we've heard Andy doesn't want us to play it, so we're not going to save his blushes. But Andy is very creative, as you know, and it is good. But yeah, I'm just smiling because Andy will never cease to amaze me. I've known Andy now for probably nearly 20 years.
And at least once a week, would you say I come up with something?
At least once a week. I mean, at our event that we're doing in a couple of weeks, you could, when you speak to Andy, you'll always hear there's something he's done, like whether it's be a disco DJ or whatever crazy idea he's had for business. But this was a new one on me, which appeared in our Friday quiz on Instagram. Every Friday we do a quiz, and one of the questions was about who in the office had written a rap. Which appliance had they written a rap about? But anyway, so that's why I'm laughing. But yeah, how are you, Andy? You good?
I'm doing all right. And the less said about that, the better. That was a conversation that we had in the office. I thought it was going to be a private thing.
But Andy did say to me that if enough people...
Only because you made such a fuss about it.
Over 10 people emailed in and wanted to hear it, that we might play it on our 250th episode.
It was more of the case that you guys were kind of saying we should definitely play it, and I'm like, look, no one wants to hear this. And in fact, I'm so confident that no one wants to hear this that I put that challenge to you, that if more than 10 people actually bothered to contact you to say they wanted to hear it,
it's a properly produced video, audio. It's not just Andy and it's going a cappella. There's all sorts of stuff going in the background. Anyway, Andy, yes. On the event, don't forget the event is on in just over a week's time. If you want to know more about the Money to the Masses event, do go to moneytothemasses.com/events. Last week we said, please, can you leave us reviews? And we've got one we're going to read out, actually. Andy's going to read it from Flying Kiwi 2. So
that's it. It's a must-listen podcast for anyone. I've recently found this podcast and have binge-listened to catch up. Love the clear explanations of the market and the unpretentious guidance on investing. Wish I'd found this years ago. So that was, as Damien said, from Flying Kiwi 2. You could also get yourself read out on this very podcast at the beginning. If you could submit your review, we'd love it. It really helps.
Yeah, it is. It really helps us go up the iTunes chart. So, on to the money stuff.
What have we got?
Tell me
what we got. Give it to me.
This week I'm doing a piece on Twitter. And Twitter has a big influence on investment markets, but some Twitter handles more than others. And it actually is really one out there, which is what the piece is going to be about. Mm-hmm. There's one Twitter handle out there that has more influence on investment markets than any other. And
I reckon I could guess what it is, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to go on about water bills. One of you wrote in about water bills, about the size of your water bill, what to do about it. And so we're going to come on to that. This is something quite close to my heart after having an extortionate water bill, which was partly my own fault, which I'll come on to. And the last piece is something I really wanted to do on cohabiting. Now, cohabiting is where a couple will live together and they're not married or in a civil partnership. And it's something that is prevalent these days, more and more so. It's actually becoming increasingly so. It's more than 3 million people cohabiting. But the problem is they don't have that many rights. Well, put it this way, don't have the same rights as somebody who is married or in a civil partnership. So I want to talk a little bit about that and point out the things that you are to watch out for and what you might need to do, because there are people, when the relationship breaks down, because that's the issue, you can find yourself in a spot of bother. So I want to talk about that.
Good stuff. What are we going to start with?
Right, the first one is on the investment world and Twitter. Now, I follow quite a lot of people on Twitter, and some people who talk about economics, there are people who talk about analysis. It's financial Twitter, it's called FinTwit, is quite good. So most of Twitter is just vile nonsense and people just trolling each other. And I mean, I get my fair share every now and then, particularly from the financial world. And it's the one social media platform where I think there's a lot of negative stuff on there, far less than there is positive aspects to it. But in the financial world, there are some people, and I'd like to include ourselves in this, who do share knowledge and information to try and help people. Now, there's a load of people I follow like that, but the only problem with them, you have to do a lot of work, you have to do a lot of reading, it's a lot of opinion. So if you're trying to work out where markets are going, who would you listen to? And there was a very interesting piece in the FT recently, and it was talking about, in fact, there's only really one Twitter handle you need to follow if you want to know what's going to happen with markets, if it's going to move markets. And that person is Donald Trump. Now, his Twitter handle is @RealDonaldTrump. Now, if you're like most people, the last thing what you want to do is read what Donald Trump has to say and the sort of divisive things he spouts. But there was some research that was carried out, and they called it Volfifi, which was a play on the word Kafifi, which he famously tweeted, I think, while asleep, or I don't know what he was doing, and it stayed on his Twitter profile for, I think it was back in 2017. It caused a massive stir around the world. What does Kafifi mean? As he probably dozed off midway through writing a tweet. So they called it Volfifi as a play on that word. And when they did the analysis to show or find out how much or if his tweets really did move markets. And the answer is they massively influence what happens in stock markets and bond markets. Now, Donald Trump tends to tweet about all sorts of things, but the ones that tend to move markets are he tweets a lot about the trade war. He tweets a lot about the Federal Reserve, so Jerome Powell, who's their equivalent of our Mark Carney. He likes to have a pop at them because the thing is, in America and like here, the government is not meant to influence what central banks do. And of course, in other economies, particularly China, they do influence what the central bank does. You're meant to be independent in America and obviously in the UK. But Donald Trump tries to exert influence on them via Twitter. And of course, where monetary policy goes does matter to the stock markets. I'll give you some examples in a minute. He also starts to tweet about stock market milestones. So you'll find him tweeting about the Dow Jones getting to sort of 24,000 or the S&P 500 hitting all-time highs. Donald Trump is very conscious of the stock market, and he uses it as a quasi-indicator of his popularity or how successful he is, which, given if he really understood it, that doesn't really make a lot of... It isn't actually... The stock market is not the economy. It never has been. But Donald Trump doesn't care. He just sits there and goes, it's gone up by X amount since I've been here. And if it wasn't for everybody else, it'd be even higher. So he's very conscious of it. The funny thing is, he only writes about it when it's going up. When it's going down, he doesn't talk about it. And the other thing Donald Trump does is he often will attack companies he doesn't like. Or he will talk about companies that he will make concessions for and things like that. So we'll come back to some of that. So when they did the analysis, out of 4,000 tweets that he'd sent and they'd analysed, 146 of them were market-moving tweets. That's an incredible number. To send a tweet that can suddenly violently move the market in that given day and over the course of time is obviously incredibly powerful, but it's therefore important for day traders, which most of us aren't. It is incredibly important because you can suddenly find yourself wrong-footed by something Donald Trump does. Now, it does also still change the narrative over the sort of short to medium term because Donald Trump's very famously is embarking on lots of trade wars. Now, during the day, he often does it during the day, so he will tweet during the day. He did recently do a couple of market-moving tweets after the market had closed, so the market didn't really move until after the weekend. But it means that what you're seeing is traders starting to therefore react to the tweets as they go out. And there are algorithms out there that specifically, so computers that specifically analyse Trump's tweets and then en masse start buying and selling based on what he writes. Trump moves markets because now markets are starting to follow what he does electronically. So even if you don't want to know what Trump is thinking because of some of the vile stuff he puts out there, because it goes straight from his head into a tweet and out there, it is the most instant way of finding out what he thinks, and he obviously is the first president to really do that. So the market will suddenly violently move. I'll give you an example. If you go back to August, on the 1st of August, Trump then suddenly went on a tirade against China, which was unexpected, where he said he was going to start raising tariffs. And then that set up that next couple of days as a violent sell-off in equity markets. But it also set up for all of August to be a very difficult month for investors, so professional investors in particular, who were very long on the stock market. They bought into the stock market and the idea that the economy was going to do much better than people had feared. Of course, therefore, that brought about the idea that a recession might be on the cards, because a trade war starts to hurt the economy if it keeps going for too long, and it might cause a recession. So Donald Trump's tweets about those things start to very quickly cause people to rotate out of one asset type into another. But he also bullies Powell, as I mentioned. So he starts dictating or trying to dictate what the US Federal Reserve does. And he's now calling for the Fed to cut rates. And he wants negative interest rates. Now, if rates go down, that tends to be very bullish for equities, because you're starting to, in a way, loosen monetary policy to start allowing more money to flow into different types of assets. Because what happens if you cut rates, it starts to make it less incentivized to keep money in a bank account and go in lower risk assets. People go in search of return and income. They start buying more riskier assets. That means they start buying equities. It fuels the stock market. So if you watch what Trump is writing in his tweets, it will start to dictate the narrative that the market follows or writes. So the narrative is like the storyline behind what's going on. So you've got the numbers going up and down on your stock market app. They always try and create a story, a narrative that will help them understand what's going on. And actually that narrative can often be wrong. I mean, it's human nature to do that. So an example of a narrative now, or what would have been a narrative, I should say, in August, was that we're heading for a recession, that the central banks are struggling to stop it. They're going to have to cut interest rates. So all the things that would work in that environment, which is buying bonds, being more defensive, did start to work, and they worked very well. So Trump's tweets are moving markets and starting to dictate where we might be going. The attack on companies is quite interesting. Donald Trump, it's unusual for a sitting president to start particularly attacking companies he doesn't like. And he doesn't particularly like tech companies. So he goes on he went on a bit of a crusade in terms of trying to say he's going to regulate them. He didn't like what they were doing. But equally, when it comes to the trade war is particularly bad for companies that have supply chains that operate in, say, China or other overseas markets that he's actually gone on the offensive against. So Apple is a good example, will start to struggle. Its share price will start to drop if the trade war angst starts to increase, because they have supply chains that are over in the Far East. And so therefore, Donald Trump might start, when he starts tweeting, it will start impacting Apple. And given that Apple is one of the biggest components of the US indexes, and therefore a lot of tracker funds and everything like that, it has a huge impact. So if you're trying to understand what's gone on in a week, then more often than not, you have to look to see what Trump has done. So you might not want to listen to what Trump says, but unfortunately, he's the one thing that lots of people are now looking at because he's so unpredictable. The problem is, if you try and invest based on what he says one day, it can change very much the next day. The other thing to watch out for what Trump does is if things start going red on the stock apps, if things start plummeting and we start getting a severe sell-off, you can almost be certain somebody from the White House will come out and talk up the possibility of a trade deal, or Trump will tweet about it. It's almost predictable that when things aren't quite going right and the stock market's falling or something like that happens, Trump will start tweeting about China are desperate to do a trade deal, it's definitely going to happen, everyone's winning type of stuff. So therefore he talks up the market a lot. The other thing to bear in mind is that the impact of his tweets is starting to affect companies and the CEOs and the decisions they make. So the possibility of a recession because of what he's writing on Twitter means that companies are starting to worry about the impact of a trade war, whether they're going to be able to buy and sell their goods to consumers, because if there's a recession, certain sectors will probably struggle more than not. So it adds to that uncertainty, which therefore starts to impact share prices. But the other thing is that in the bond market is really the biggest market out there, and that has been impacted massively by Trump, because as the likelihood of recession was seemingly increasing, bond yields started tumbling. So therefore the value of bonds, if you owned them, started going up. So they were a good part of a portfolio to have recently. But what also happens is when bond yields are going down, it's a good time for companies to borrow money. And so they issue bonds. For them, that's a positive. So people are starting to try and borrow money. There's been a flood recently of companies coming to market trying to borrow money at low rates. But the converse to that, so the opposite end of the spectrum, if they start to worry about recession, what could happen is even though rates are low, people will stop wanting to buy bonds because they'll start thinking that the companies might go bust and they won't get their money back. So you can suddenly get liquidity dry up. So it means that there's a lot of uncertainty within companies themselves, what to do with the future in terms of their possible borrowing in the future, liquidity and everything. So the message of this piece is follow Trump just to get some context of what is going on. And you may as well hear the story from him firsthand when it comes to what's going on in markets, because then you might get an understanding of why you get some highly volatile moves in your portfolio and you can just dismiss it as, yeah, Trump's gone off on one again.
Yeah, good. Okay, moving on to cohabiting. People who are living together who aren't married, but effectively doing the same thing as married couples. They're probably sharing bills and bits and pieces. What's this piece?
So cohabiting, as I mentioned in the intro, is increasing I wouldn't say increasing in popularity. It's just, I think, out of necessity, where people live together, don't necessarily want to get married, and some of it is down to the cost and it's personal choice. The issue is that the world of law in terms of finances doesn't really recognise cohabiting in the way perhaps it should do. So what it means is that people who cohabit are likely missing out on tax breaks and pension benefits. So they're just two of the things. So I'm going to run through some of the things that you could be missing out on and things to bear in mind, because there'll be a lot of people listening to this who cohabit. I mean, like I did. Before I got married, I cohabited with my now wife, so it's just a natural progression that people have. The only problem is some people cohabit for years, so you could have children together, you could be together for 20 years, so in all intents and purposes you just might not want to get married.
Yeah, there are some people that are effectively against marriage, which is as is their choice.
As is their choice. I know quite a few people who are friends who don't want to get married. They don't see the point. It's just a piece of paper to them.
Yeah.
But of course, as is inevitable in life, just like if you're married, you can then break up. The difference is if you are married and you break up, so you get divorced, there are rules out there that protect each party to make sure that they are looked after. Because to give an example, you may have a husband and wife. This isn't just about different sex couples. I mean, it's the same thing if you have same-sex couples. I'm going to just use a man and a woman just to make life easy rather than we have to caveat every possible example. But let's say there is a wife who stayed at home while her husband went out and was working. Then if they were married and separated, there are certain things, for example, that she could get. When they got divorced, she'd have rights to the pension, she had rights to the obviously joint finances, things to be split. That doesn't really happen. It doesn't happen with cohabiting couples. So I'm going to rattle through one or two scenarios. So let's imagine if you lived in a house and you bought a house together. So you were a cohabiting couple and you bought a house. You just weren't married. Then what would happen is you need to think about the way that you own that house. There are two different ways you can own a house. You can be joint tenants, or you can be tenants in common. Mm-hmm. And joint tenants is the usual manner. So what that means is that you buy a house together, you have the equal right to the whole of the property, you can't pass it on in your will. And what happens if you were to die, then if you bought a house jointly with somebody else, then the house would pass on to that other person. With tenants in common, it's almost like you got an invisible line and went down the middle of the house, and 50-50 of that property, or whatever split you want, it doesn't have to be 50-50, mm-hmm. You can divvy up the house how you want to, and then what happens is you can then pass on your share in a will, or more importantly, it doesn't automatically go to the other person if you were to die, which is important, because if you imagine, I mean, just to give you some context, why would people do that? It always was really popular with people who wanted to try and mitigate inheritance tax. So if you imagine a couple, they're a married couple, they could, in days gone by before you inherited your nil rate band inheritance tax, you never used to be able to do that. People would end up changing their house to be tenants in common, and they'd give their share. So let's say the dad died first, his share would go to the kids, he'd use his nil rate band, so it would get used up. But if, for some reason, you were a cohabiting couple and you had a tenants in common arrangement, so you had 50-50 of the house, the problem is that the other person, if they were to die, could pass on their share to anybody they wanted. And you, as a person who was now in that house, will have an issue, because ultimately it can mean you could end up being homeless. But what would likely happen is you're going to have to buy out the person who's inherited the other share of the property, which you might not be able to afford to or want to do. So it's something to bear in mind, because obviously if you have a joint tenancy, then if the other person dies, you're going to inherit that property, which is obviously going to be important to you. Because if you've got, don't forget, like we said, people might have children and stuff like that, so there might be long-term relationships. But maybe if somebody didn't have a will or anything like that and they weren't married, then their share will go via the rules of intestacy. It's something to bear in mind, that you've got to think about what will happen if your partner dies if you're cohabiting. Now, there is a positive, actually, I'm going to say, which it sounds like being cohabiting is all very negative, but there is a quirk and a positive part of cohabiting, actually, because usually when you sell a house, you have a tax relief. So when you sell your house, you don't have to pay capital gains tax on it, and it's called private residence relief. So if you move house, whatever your gain is, you don't pay any tax on that. We'll ignore the fact you've got to pay stamp duty. That's just life, really, unfortunately. But you don't pay tax on the gains. What happens is, if you are married, you can only have one designated home. So you have to have a home that's designated as yours. So to have that relief that's it's applied to, because obviously some people have multiple properties. There has to be one that's your designated home. Now, if you were two individuals who owned property, so you had a flat and a house each or something like that, then you got married, then you have a time limit in which one of them has to become your nominated marital home.
Right.
And that means that at the moment that's 18 months grace you get for that, but it's might be reduced to 9 months in next year, so we have to keep an eye on that. So you technically can own two properties, one each, and you both can have different addresses. So if you sold your property, you aren't paying tax on two properties. So if you are in that scenario and you're going to get married, bear that in mind, because what will happen is you'll start therefore having a potential tax bill when you sell your home going forward. So you've got to look into the ins and outs of that. It sounds a little bit more scary than it is, but bear that in mind. So newlyweds will end up having to only have one home. But of course, like I said, if you had two different residences and you happen to be a couple and you decided to live in one, then in theory you have the potential to have two release on those properties. So that's a positive. But one of the things before we move on to other areas, if you rent, you want to make sure you've got a joint tenancy agreement when you rent in, if you're cohabiting, because obviously you don't want to get to the point where you could potentially be kicked out of a home. So you want to have some protection there. So that's the other thing to bear in mind if you're renting. Now, if you are cohabiting, there are issues with things like pensions and life insurance too. So a divorced couple will automatically, they'll end up having some potential pension sharing order so they can split their assets. The problem is, if you're cohabiting, there's none of that. So there is no automatic right to people's assets or pensions and things like that. So that's one of the issues. If you split up, you just go your separate ways, you've got to think about it. What ends up happening is there's no automatic division of assets under the law of the land because they don't recognise it. So it's the same with pensions. And therefore, you could end up finding that one of the couple goes off and they've got a nice healthy pension, the other one doesn't. And that person that doesn't might actually end up having the children. So they've got to think about their future as well. On pensions and life insurance, it's not automatic that they will recognise cohabiting partners. So if you die, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will recognise somebody who isn't your spouse and pay benefits to them. So you need to check with the pension scheme or the life insurance that they will pay out. Most will do these days. So you want to make sure that your family are protected. Double check that. Unfortunately, there is an area where cohabiting people are treated in an equal way, to some regard, as married people. And that's only in the tax arena, unfortunately, child benefit. So it seems perhaps unsurprising that when it comes to tax, the taxman makes sure he gets his money, so he treats you like a married couple. So what happens if you get child benefit? The way it's assessed is once one of the adults in your house start earning more than £50,000, you start to lose that child benefit. With a cohabiting couple, they can still, even if that other person isn't the father or of the children in the relationship, they can still start to reduce your child benefit because of the other person in the property, the cohabiting person, is earning more than £50,000. So what the message is there is, just because you're cohabiting, don't think there isn't any impact on child benefit if somebody starts to earn a decent amount of money. There is. So unfortunately, you are treated as almost married in that regard. So the one final bit I want to finish up on this piece is to do with financial associations. Now, if, for example, you end up taking out a bank account or some form of credit with somebody, your finances become linked. And from a credit perspective, that means that if somebody has bad credit and you don't, it will start to impact your ability to get credit. So just because you're not married, it doesn't matter. Your finances can be linked to somebody, anybody in fact, if you take out an account with them or you have some form of credit. So if you have a mortgage, for example, you start to become financially linked. So if you're cohabiting, you want to think carefully whether you want to be having bills together, whether you're going to have a joint bank account, whether you're going to have these things if it's relatively new. I'm not being, it sounds so unromantic, but I'm just being practical here, because if somebody has bad credit and you don't, that might impact your ability to get a mortgage going forward in the future. And I know people who have done this, but one of them bought a house because they were able to get the credit because their partner wouldn't have been able to, but then eventually became married anyway. So in time, once they'd already bought the house, so it all worked out. But the more important point is, if you do separate, and this is true of anybody anyway, if you do separate, then you want to make sure that you disassociate your finances. And you can get a notice of disassociation from the rating agencies out there, and you can make sure your finances are disassociated, so they're no longer linked. When people go and do a credit check on you, they don't link you with your ex-partner who's going off doing some crazy things and racking up huge bills. Of course, you can't do that if you've still got financial products together. So say you have some credit that you're still paying off together, you're going to have to get rid of that before you can disassociate, because you still have something together. So that is a roundup of the things that people should be aware of if they are cohabiting.
Good stuff. Moving on to this last piece then, we're going to be talking about water supply, and we've had an email in. I'll read it out if that's okay, Damien. Hi, hope you guys are well. I wondered if you could do a quick piece on water supply. My water bill has gone up repeatedly each year, but I've looked at the supply and no way has anyone come out to read it, as you can see from the cobwebs, etc. My bill says that I've used the equivalent of 140 baths of water in 6 weeks. We are 2 adults and a child and don't have a dishwasher, and we share baths and don't shower every day. We don't have a hose or a pond, etc. I keep phoning, but I'm on hold forever. They seem to be a monopoly. How do I escalate this? Are others in the same boat? So Damien, this reader is incredulous. Something's happened here with their water supply. They're not happy. What's going on?
Well, interestingly, Andy is a man of many talents, right? But so is everybody who seems to work at Money to the Masses, because Lauren how old's Lauren? She's in her mid-20s, I think.
24.
And
25. She just turned 25.
Did she?
I think so. Lauren, how old are you?
24, she just said. So Lauren is 24, but she's already held a number of interesting jobs, and one of them was being an air hostess, which is why she's so good at travel stuff. She did a travel piece not long ago, but she's also, for her sins, worked at the water board, and in fact I think it's the same water board as this particular listener. So I asked Lauren what the answer to this was, and given that she used to deal with this kind of stuff, so I'm going to rattle through what Lauren said. Basically, what they do is they estimate your average water usage depending on how many people live in your home. So what they've done is they haven't been out to read this meter, so it seems. Now, what the person needs to do is read the meter themselves, and then they're going to have to hang on the phone, unfortunately, and try and get an updated bill or ask them to come out and read it. But if she compares the reading on the meter, it does mean getting in there with the spiders and having a look. It isn't always easy to read a water meter, because mine is in a really obscure place where they put it in. But if you can read it and make sure you can see what the reading is compared to what the estimate is, then you'll be able to know whether you have used as much as they are claiming that you have. The other thing to bear in mind is that the bills might go up because they may have read it, but they may have previously underestimated how much the person was using. So therefore, what they will do is they'll start to increase your direct debit. Conversely, you can get into a loop where they start to reduce your direct debit, and then you get hit by a massive bill in a year's time where they've underestimated it. So it always seems to catch up with you. But one thing I would say is, if you go, this is for everybody listening to this podcast, one of the popular questions are people who are still on water rates. So you get this, they estimate what your bill is all the time. You don't have a meter. Now, there is a calculator out there called, if you go to ccwater.org.uk/water meter calculator, all one word, Andy will put a link in the show notes. there's a calculator that can tell you, it can estimate what your bill will be on a meter. So the idea of the calculator is for people who sit there and think, would I be better off on a meter than not being on a meter, being on normal water rates? And what it does, it asks you how many showers you have a week, how many times you use the washing machine, general questions about water usage, and then it will estimate the potential bill. It's pretty accurate actually, because I did it. And in this instance, they could use that calculator to see, based on what they estimate their usage is, whether the bill is fair or not. The other thing I just want to throw out there is, it's a story that impacted me, is to check whether she's got a leak. Now, it doesn't have to be a leak where it's coming through your ceiling, but I had one in my toilet recently. So where you end up flushing the toilet and then you get these slight overflows, the trickle, it starts trickling down.
You can hear the trickle.
I could hear it, and then it would eventually stop. But over time, over months in fact, the period before it actually stopped, where the system tried to fill up and then it would eventually stop, got longer and longer. But if you shut the bathroom door, you just don't really notice
Problem
it.
solved.
Problem solved. You just bury your head in the sand. Well, put it this way, in about 2 months I managed to spend, when I got the bill, was 180 quid more than what it would have been over that period. Wow. So it's a huge amount of water. You don't realise it, because when I had it fixed, it was actually a decent leak, but because it was running down into the toilet at the rate, you don't really notice it. You didn't really hear noise. It's just going in and filling up the bottom of the bowl, which automatically then disappears. That can massively stack up. So I would say to her as well, just double check those sorts of things. She hasn't got some sort of leak, because it sounds like a lot of money, but seriously, you wouldn't have realised the amount of the leak. And I don't water the garden and do excessive stuff like that. So it could be that the usage is correct, but it could be there's a reason for it, so you need to double check.
I've got another little thing to add here about grey water. A lot of water companies, they charge you for your water in and also for your water out. This is more of a FYI, really. I mean, environmentally, you should be saving your grey water anyway. If you can, try and use your grey water twice. By grey water, I mean your wastewater, things like, from washing up and maybe baths and showers and things like that. So I used to think I was doing the world a favour, and I also used to think I was saving a few bucks by collecting up the bath water every so often. If it was clean enough, I would actually maybe, scoop some of it out and water the plants with it and stuff like that, But by all accounts, that doesn't actually save you any money. So if you're charged for water in and water out, it's purely maths. It's a percentage that they charge you. And I thought I was saving the world.
You were saving the world, Andy. You were being selfless, because it wasn't saving any money. No, because what you have, when you get a water bill, you get the amount you use, but there's an amount in this that gets taken away as sewage. But they don't measure that. There's nothing spinning in your pipes to sit there and go, oh yeah, look, they've actually used X, they've put X amount into the sewage system. It's just an estimate. And Lauren was talking about this in the office when Andy said about him, how he uses grey water to save money, and then unfortunately, Lauren,
you're not saving any money. You're just causing a bit of a headache for you and your family. But I was saving the world.
Do you no longer save the world?
I do it less. I'm less bothered about saving my grey water now. Now I know it's not saving me any pennies.
Well, that's it from me and Captain Planet.
For this week. Do get in touch with Damien if you've got any pressing matters, anything you'd like us to cover, any feedback on the show. You can contact Damien at moneytothemasses with number 2, that's Twitter, or of course via email. It's damien@moneytothemasses.com, and of course in the usual other places like Instagram and Facebook, and of course our YouTube channel. Like our videos over there and subscribe. Anything else mentioned apart from obviously the event? Not long now. Anyone who signed up, brilliant, can't wait to see you. And anyone who hasn't and wants to come, there's still just about time.
It's just about time. We've managed to squeeze a few more people from the venue that we can have in there. So do come, put your name down, moneytothemasses.com/events. You'll get directed to the page where you can secure a ticket.
Great stuff. Until next time.
Until next week.